The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's so great to be connecting with all of you. Thank you for tuning us in and turning us on. As usual, you are the best listening audience on the planet. And before I introduce my fabulous guest, I want to say hi to B. Hi, B.
Hey, Pat. How you doing? Staying cool?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Big tournament this weekend.
Oh, yeah. So you got to stay cool and get your game on.
I got to do all of that and drive to Tacoma.
Oh, that's not too far.
No. I'm hoping to head out before like the rush hour. So that's what I'm thinking for today.
That's good. This is a big tournament then? Something you had planned?
Well, it's a Washington State deal. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Like, I haven't played competitively in a really long time, and I just love to play. Sure. So it's really good to get out and play with people you don't know. And this is the best way to do it.
Well, yeah, advances your game.
Yeah, it also helps me normalize my crazy.
Don't we all need some of that?
And that's what today's show is about, because I come from a crazy family, the making of a psychiatrist, with my very special guest, author Dr. Edward Hallowell. And guess what? Why? Why is this that? Well, look, Dr. Hallowell, renowned ADHD expert, child and adult psychiatrist, world-renowned speaker, New York Times bestselling author, graduate of Harvard College. I can keep going on and on and on. Whether you know him from Oprah, CNN, Today Show, this is not the conversation. The conversation is not about news and media. The conversation is about his fabulous book, Because I Come from a Crazy Family. And I was joking, Benny, a little bit with Dr. Hallowell before the show. And I said, there's a very good reason that you're a psychiatrist and I'm a psychologist. Very good reason. And I think he nailed it in his book. So we are going to talk about this today. Dr. Hallowell, great to have you here. Great to have you on the show. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name. But it's part
okay.
A lot of people crazy.
A lot of people do that. Get all the way to the third syllable, it's hard.
Yeah, well, no kidding. That's the story of my life. I mean, think about it. We're going to talk about sort of our beginnings. But if you think about my beginning and sort of the trauma of my family, I stuttered for most of my early years. So the fact that I can even read your name is really kind of interesting for me. Mm-hmm. But whether or not, we're talking about parts of ourselves that very few people know, there's something to be said about telling a story that helps people understand that they can beat the odds. Isn't that really what this is about? Isn't that kind of really what the book is about too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a story of one person beating the odds with a lot of help from a lot of people, which is always the way it's done. And it's a funny, it's a storybook. There's a lot of humor in it, and a lot of pathos in it. And the first half is about my growing up, and the second half is about my training at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center in psychiatry, and the great teachers I had, which were some wonderful patients and some wonderful psychiatrists. And It is, I had real odds stacked against me, but it's a very hopeful book, because here I am at age 68. I've been married 29 years with 3 wonderful children. They're all in their 20s now, and they're launched and doing wonderfully well. And then that really was my life's most precious goal, was to give my children the happy childhood I was not able to have. And of course, most of that credit goes to my wife too. But I'll claim a little bit of the credit.
But you're right, though. We have to give a shout out. You're right. We have to give a shout out to the people that have loved us along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that.
Yeah.
And also part of writing it was by way of saying, don't keep these things secret. It's time we tear down the taboo. It's time we, stop pretending you have to hide these conditions. And there's no other part of medicine where you keep it secret. If you have a broken leg, you don't say, "Oh, well, I better not tell anyone that." But then there's no Hallmark cards for I hope you get over your depression.
Right.
We somehow think it's unseemly or it's still there's a stigma that goes with it. So I just got naked. I wrote about it as openly as I possibly could, and I wrote about my crazy family, and I'm very proud of them. They did have various kinds of mental illnesses, but they were also brilliant and fun and funny and imaginative and creative, and a lot of them went to Harvard. My brother was finished near the top of his class, and so did my uncle and my father and my cousin. And they were really smart, really creative, really good people. They were generous and kind, and that's what people often don't understand. A mental illness doesn't define all of you. It defines a part of you, but not all of you. And the fact of the matter is, most really creative, interesting people, have one or another of the various conditions we diagnose, whether it's ADD and dyslexia, which is what I have, or major depression, which is what Abraham Lincoln had, or bipolar disorder, or an anxiety disorder, which just millions of people have, or substance use disorder, which millions of people have, or various of the others. It's rare to find an extremely talented, creative person who doesn't have one of those. And it's rare to find a family that isn't touched by one of these issues. And so the idea of keeping it all secret and stigmatized and surrounded with shame it's just a terrible thing. We should have progressed further than that in our civilization. And so my book was one small attempt to kind of blow the lid off of that.
Yeah, and the stories in here, which we're going to talk about a couple of them. There's one in here that I so related to. We're going to talk about in a minute. But you're touching upon something interesting because you're right about this. Any other illness we're out there talking about, but when it comes to things like the range of what you just talked about, we're not we forget it. Even as well known as people think ADD or ADHD is, they still don't know about it. What's interesting about this is you and I know. We know this from how many years we've studied, right? We know that secrets are not good.
No.
We know this.
They're
right?
not good. They're not good. Secrets, what do they say in AA? You're only as healthy as your secrets, secrets really, they fester, and they really make people sick. So there's something wonderfully relieving and health-giving in just not carrying around secrets. Secrets are toxic. They really they really poison your system. Mm-hmm. It feels really good to let go of all your secrets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting we're talking about this because for a really long time, I was looking at this, and let's talk about alcoholism for a minute. I come from a family who kept a secret about my mom's death for decades. And it wasn't until I cornered my uncle, Al, in his 80s or something, the only living member of the Basili family, where I asked him, I said, listen, Nobody wants to tell me how my mom died when I was 6, why I went to Catholic boarding school, and then why my sister went on to get depressed and gain 450 pounds. And I said to him, Uncle Ralph, something is not right. And then I said to him, my dad passed away and my stepmom kept the letters from my mom. And I said, come on, why aren't we talking about the fact that my mom attempted suicide, wrote letters to my dad, then, from Bellevue, by the way, then they let her out, and she decided, okay, that didn't work. I'm just going to light the whole house on fire, and that's the way I'm going to go. And why wouldn't we talk about this? And why wouldn't we talk about her addiction and how that happened? And now I'm older, and I know why we don't. Because even with somebody like you and somebody like me, we can talk about it now. But I got to tell you, doctor, and this is what we're going to talk about. You ever go on a date and talk about like your parents, and then they say, oh, where's your mom? And they say, oh, well, my mom died when I was 6. Well, how'd she die? Well, she committed suicide. Okay, that's the last time you're going to have that date. That's like the end of the date. That's like the end. That's like you haven't even started, and that's the end. How can we change this narrative? How can we do it?
Well, see, if I were dating that person, I'd want to. That wouldn't be the last time you'd see me. You know, see, I think this is a very interesting person. So,
yeah.
You know, I think I think we're starting to change it. I have to think we're starting to change it. That we're less, you know, even the content of mainstream TV, you know, look at how All in the Family changed the dialogue. And that was, 25 years ago?
Yeah.
What a groundbreaker that was, where you could talk openly about racism and sexism, and you could, and what an iconic figure Archie Bunker became. And now, you know, I think TV is ready for a show that deals openly with mental illness. In fact, I'm hoping that my book might get turned into a TV show, and because, you know, I think these issues are so common.
Yeah.
You know, this is not rare. I mean, who doesn't know someone with an anxiety disorder, or who doesn't have one? I mean, who doesn't know someone who who struggles with depression or substance use? I mean, you take those, or ADHD. I mean, it's and if we could just talk about them openly, laugh about them. I mean, not to say depression is funny; it's anything but funny. But if you could talk about it without shame, and if you could say, "Oh my God, I'm going through depression now," and so that's why I don't want to come to your party, and not have to make up some lame excuse like, you know, it's the night I get to do my hair or something. You know,
right,
and
exactly.
Someone could say, I understand, you know, and that's okay. I understand you just don't feel motivated to do anything. And if you could just openly say, I'm going through depression, and, you know, or if you could say, you know, I really have terrible social anxiety, and that's why I don't like to be in big groups. And you know, if that could, you're not proud of it, but you don't have to be ashamed of it.
Right.
You know,
right.
and realize that there's a lot of people who are like that, and they're usually very talented. I mean, that's the interesting thing about, well, like take anxiety, take worrying. It usually takes a lot of intelligence and creativity to dream up all the stuff we worriers worry about. You know, I mean, if you're not too bright, you won't perceive all the things that could go wrong. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I mean, your book. First, let me just say, I am so going to lobby for this book to be made into some kind of series or something.
Yeah.
Because I have to tell you, I'm reading this book, and I'm actually on my second read of it, and I'm going through it, and I'm like, now, why haven't I talked about that kind of thing? So let's talk about one of the stories, and let's talk about the book. And Benny, if we could just skip this break. First off, if anybody's out there, look at the now headlines about anxiety medication. First off, just want to say, latest study I think shows that anxiety medication now is surpassing um, um, pain medication. So that I think is out there now. But let's talk about the book. When we look at this, and what you have done is you have shared your life stories. And in the book, there are many stories that talk about what we will do, how we will behave, what hoops we will jump through for the people perhaps that we've grown up with that are really crazy. And I was struck by the one story because I did something similar where there was this, you're telling the story of where Jamie wanted like the hamburger, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like clear across the other end of town.
Right.
Right. And it's like, oh, okay, I want this 3D hamburger, right? And
Right.
I'm reading this and I'm thinking, oh, no, is he going to go get that? Is he going to go get that? Tell us about that story, because it's very typical of what we agreed to early on in life about this.
Yeah, well, growing up, the adults were kind of in their own world. And so my two cousins, who were really my siblings, Lynn and Jamie, and I were kind of you'd call it enmeshed today, but we really relied on each other. And Lynn had Jamie and me wrapped around her little finger, and so there was this one day where she wanted, it was the forerunner of the Big Mac was Howard Johnson's had something called a 3D.
Yep.
And she had it in her head that she wanted a 3D. And she didn't want to go get it. Now, it was clear across town in Chatham, the little town on Cape Cod where we lived. And she wanted me to get on my bicycle and bicycle across town. It's about a 15-minute bike ride, and buy her a 3D and bring it back. And I said, I don't want to do that. And she said, well, what else would you be doing? And I said, well, nothing. Well, she said, well, then why won't you do this? I said, well, because I don't want to. I'd rather sit here and do nothing. And she said, well, isn't that pretty selfish? And I said, well, what do you mean? Am I your servant? And she just had a way, and she talked me into it. So the next thing you know, I'm bicycling across town on the hot summer day to get her darn 3D. But that's what we would, and we pretty much we just hung out together, and we made our safe little world, and in Chatham, and she passed away about 10 years ago at the age of 56, way too young.
Wow. Let's talk about the book, because you touched upon this earlier. And for those of you just tuning in, the book is Because I Come from a Crazy Family. And by the way, this would be a great time to give us a shout if you've got questions, 1-800-930-2819. Because I Come from a Crazy Family, The Making of a Psychiatrist. And this is, of course, my very special guest, Dr. Edward Hallowell. And, of course, a psychiatrist. And the book is pretty much like a memoir. But the stories in here are so telling, and they're so well written. I mean, everything from, talking about the principal, and I grew up with, by the way, two pretty crazy stepsisters, right? My dad remarried. Mm-hmm. And my stepmom, was almost the same age as my real sister. Very, very young. And so I went from crazy to even like crazy on steroids right there with that. But I have to say, because of my own diagnosis, now we know it as, what do we know it as? ADD, ADHD. I don't know what you call it. And then I have a little learning thing that I didn't discover till I went back to a graduate program. Mm-hmm. They were all gifts. But for some reason, I was optimistic. Now, I want to ask you about that, because you sound like a pretty optimistic guy.
Yes.
So isn't that an example of how crazy can develop or help people develop personalities that can be quite successful. And we don't talk about that enough. We think that we all have to go the pathway of our moms, our dads, our siblings.
Yeah, and how do we find our way? How do we find our way through different kinds of, my dad had bipolar disorder, and my mom divorced him, and then married a man who was alcoholic, and she became alcoholic along with him, and he was abusive, and I witnessed all of that, and at the age of 10, I got sent away to a boarding school, and all of those strikes against me. But you're quite right. I'm a very positive, upbeat, optimistic guy. How does that happen? It's hard to say.
Okay, I got a burning question for you. Did you actually make it through boarding school? See, I was sent away to boarding school at age 6, Catholic boarding school. I shared this with Matthew Fox the other day. First of all, as a psychiatrist, do you ever send a 6-year-old to a boarding school? Ever?
No.
Do you ever send him to like a Catholic boarding school? No. But I know why I was sent, because my mom, as I just shared, was going through this alcohol. But the good news for me is I got thrown out of Catholic boarding school because I was just. Did you make it through boarding school?
I did. No, for me it was wonderful, because it was so much better than home. I loved it. Of course, I didn't have nuns and that sort of thing. This was just this was nice, normal environment for me to go to, and I loved it. I started in the 5th grade, and then I went to a prep school in New Hampshire called Exeter, which was even more wonderful, and then to Harvard, which I also loved, and then to medical school down in New Orleans at Tulane. So I pretty much grew up in these institutions, and they saved me. They were wonderful places. I met friends. I met people who weren't drunk, as far as I could tell, and who were not hitting each other and not yelling at each other, and I didn't realize how abnormal what I had seen was. But again, the memoir is not in any way casting aspersions. It's not a sort of story of my life in hell at all. It's full of funny stories and funny people, and even my stepfather, who's the closest to a evil person in the book, even he, I think I paint in a fairly tender and forgiving way, and because he had his own tragedy that he went through, and people become. The AA says hurt people, so it's usually when you've suffered pain that you inflict pain, and why you and I found different outcomes. Is it the optimism gene? Is it the grace of God? Is it the fairy godmother? I don't know. I don't
either. I just tell you, there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not extremely grateful for it.
Me too.
And I don't try to understand it, right? You too, right? I can tell from the book and the way you wrote it. Yeah. You're right about this. This is not a book about let's give up, let's roll over. This is a book about let me share these stories and let me share all different sides of them. I think, what was the nickname you were given? Were you given the nickname Dink? Did I remember that from the book?
Oh yeah, from the resident, the surgical resident that I followed around. Yeah,
right.
And there was an adjective before Dink as well.
Yeah, I know. I remember that. It was
effing Dink, but it was very affectionate. Dink. He would he would call me effing Dink. Get over here and. Do this, do that. I loved him. I loved my 3 months on surgery with him. McCormick was his name. He was wonderful.
Well, I want to talk about that because, look, this book is filled with angels that have showed up. I call them angels. Yeah. But they're special people.
Yeah.
And I
are
have a
angels. I
whole
agree.
lifetime of them. You
Yeah,
know, my best friend Linda's been my friend since 1973.
yeah,
But her parents were to me like these institutions, these schools were to you.
yeah.
Her parents and Linda represented a side of normal that I honestly didn't believe. And I'm very grateful that, I mean, I didn't know how to set a dining room table, right? Because I came from a family that never set the dining room table right because it just wasn't good to do that,
that's
right?
that's such a telling detail. You didn't know how
Oh,
to set a table,
I didn't.
and Linda taught you how.
Linda and Linda's mother. I never
So,
looked anybody in the eye. And the first time I met Linda's mother, I walked in, I looked at the floor all the time. I couldn't tell you
yeah,
what the sky, I couldn't tell you
yeah.
what the weather was because I'm always looking at the floor.
So she
And
told you to look her in the eye.
oh my God, Joan was like, I walked in, Linda introduced me. She said, "Listen, young lady, let's get something straight right now. If you're going to come in my house, you have to look me in the eye."
Oh,
And
that's
I looked
wonderful.
up and I looked her in the eye and I
That's
thought, oh my
wonderful.
God, she's got blue eyes and brown hair. But
Wow.
isn't this why we're sharing this? Because one, you're right. You know, part of AA, as you talked about, there are two parts. One, if you're fortunate enough to get the 12th step, what it says is that you are to take what you've learned and give it back. Isn't that
Yeah,
what we're doing here?
yeah,
Saying yes to what I'm doing was the scariest thing in my life.
yeah.
I'm such an introvert, and now I've been on 15 years. I have a top show, and I started a positive talk network.
Yeah.
My friends think now I've lost my mind. I don't think so. Do you?
No, I think you're absolutely picture of sanity, and you're giving back in a wonderful, wonderful way, and I think you're right. The ruling emotion I feel every day is gratitude. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
grateful. I'm so grateful, and I don't know who or what made it happen, but whatever
Mm-hmm.
it was, I just feel colossal gratitude, and I look at my children, and I look at the work I've been lucky enough to do, and I look at my wife. I look at the. I've made many mistakes along the way, many mistakes,
Yeah.
but I've stumbled into some wonderfulness, and I just want other people to know that yes, the bad things come, but don't give up, and the way to keep going is through connection. It's through reaching out, listening to your show, Pat, or just talking to a friend. Get a dog. Dogs are the best therapists in the world. Go back to church or synagogue or whatever your tradition is. Go
Mm-hmm.
forgive somebody that you've been fighting with. Forgiveness is really a gift you give to yourself, and connect with, go to a museum, drink in some beauty,
Mm-hmm.
a big dose of beauty will make you feel good. I mean, there's hope to be found, and it's
Mm-hmm.
largely free of charge. Connection is, I call it the other vitamin C, Vitamin Connect, and
Oh,
it's right there to be had, and we're starving for it. The Surgeon General named loneliness as the
yes.
biggest medical problem in the country today, and my goodness, that's one problem everyone can solve. The obstacle is fear of rejection, fear of looking stupid, fear of of just not knowing how to do it, and we're substituting electronic connection for real human connection. So and it doesn't have to be human. A canine connection is wonderful. And if you prefer cats, okay, get a cat. But if you need to start with a pet, start with a pet. But connection, listening to your show is a kind of a connection. But get out in nature, get out with people, join a group, join a club, book clubs, volunteer. This is where meaning and love comes through connection. It really does. And to be had every day.
Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I want to pick up where we're leaving off right now. And the reason is you're absolutely right about loneliness, and yet, some of the hardest things that I've had to do in my life, and I'm watching it in people that are close to me right now, is make a decision to end the loneliness. See, we think sometimes, why don't you just get on a plane and go out there? Why sit by yourself? We think, come on, just go do it. But unless you've been there at that place, and I've been there, and I know you know what I mean, I have not been able to really take that action out of loneliness without some help. Mm-hmm. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what that means. And what does it mean, despite not wanting to take yourself out of your house or get on a plane or get in the car? What does it do to you when you do that? Not to mention, most people want to know how I can focus long enough to actually play table tennis. But that's the misconception about this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Golden Otter Divinations Radio, where the metaphysical meets the mainstream with Autumn Seibel. Tune in the first Friday every month at 9 a.m. Pacific as Autumn, educator, health coach, and medium, explores metaphysical and mainstream strategies on how to elevate your level of conscious living. Draw in the abundance that is yours by divine right. For more information about working with Autumn, visit goldenotter.us. That's golden like the precious metal and otter like the precious animal.us.
So when are you most peaceful? When you're connected to your source. When you have a deep connection to your soul. And you're living your spiritual way, your unique way. And when are you most stressed? When you're not. It's really, really simple, friends. When we start to borrow desires, we start to control others and situations and people, things go wrong. Nobody wants to be controlled. So it's really important to get connected to the source if you want to remain stress-free. When you're connected to the source, you will have deep access to your own intuition, your own way of living, absolutely fresh and new. Every moment.
Are you ready to make deep, lasting, transformative changes? Then tune in each month on Transformation Talk Radio for Susanna Jameson's hit show, Love, Light, Sound Radio. During her show, Susanna inspires and supports spiritually and health-conscious individuals all over the world to reconnect with their hearts, their inner peace, and balance. Love, Light, Sound Radio. Transformation happens here now. For more information, visit SusannaJameson.com.
This is Debbie Pokornik with a break-free parenting tip. If you haven't been practicing active listening or are getting into some bad habits, it's a good idea to go back to the basics and remind yourself how to be a good listener. Here's an idea that might help. When your child comes to you with a story about her day, set aside whatever you're doing and give her your full attention. If you're in the middle of something that can't be put aside, tell her that you really want to be able to give her story your full attention and ask if you could continue the conversation at a specific time. So, for example, this sounds like an important story and I'd really like to give it my full attention. Can we talk about it in 10 minutes when supper's in the oven? Active listening might sound like common sense, but often it's these simple skills that get buried in our parenting pack and easily forgotten or overlooked. Challenge yourself to practice this skill for a full week and see if you notice a difference in how much your child is sharing.
For information and to work with Debbie, visit empoweringnrg.com.
Hey, everybody, we're going to give a copy of the book away because I come from a crazy family. I don't know if any of you relate to this out there. Maybe not. The Making of a Psychiatrist. Yeah. 1-800-930-2819. First caller, we'd love to give a copy of the book away. The other thing is also, I want to make sure that you all have information and can find out more about the book. What is the best website for us to send people to, Doctor?
Well, to buy the book, Amazon. And to learn about me, my own website, drhallowell.com. Just Dr, no period, Hallowell.com.
Okay. And then also, same thing on Facebook, everybody. It's facebook.com, Dr. Hallowell. Okay. Let's talk story. I was just sharing during the break a little bit of my crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even go into details. But I went through this book. There were parts of it I just laughed, and other parts I cried.
Yeah.
Right? I love, conversations where you say things like, God smiled on me.
Right.
And directed me, because that's the way I live my life. I dialed a wrong phone number 15 years ago, and I didn't hang up. And I pulled out a credit card, and I paid like $10,000 for internet-only radio. And you want to talk about people having me committed? Yeah. But, I knew. Tell us about you. How have you been directed in your life? And there are funny stories in here. And there's the reality of this as well. I would love for you to share. Do you have a favorite story?
Well, I mean, so many stories, but, there is the story of when this voice came to me when I was 10 years old, and I was about to go swimming down in Chatham, and this voice just appeared out of nowhere and said, you should become a psychiatrist. I mean, it was, technically it was an auditory hallucination, but it was the only time I've ever had one. But so you could say I was psychotic for a moment, but I didn't really make much of it. It was so strange. You would have thought I was, dumbstruck, but I wasn't. I sort of heard the voice and I said, oh, that's interesting. And I went off and went swimming. and it's not like I committed right then and there to becoming a psychiatrist, but it must have planted some kind of seed in me, because here I am. But so that was certainly an arresting moment.
Yeah.
And then the very unusual moment was the moment of my conception. Where my father, he was an All-American hockey player at Harvard, and married my mother, who was a beautiful debutante, and they'd gotten married and looked like they were going to just have a wonderful life together. And they had my two brothers, and the war came along, and my dad volunteered and was made a captain of a destroyer escort, and he went off and fought German submarines in the North Atlantic. And when the war ended, he came back and he went crazy. He was diagnosed schizophrenic, and that's what they diagnosed everyone who was psychotic back then. And so he was given shock treatments. And one weekend they decided to let him go home on a trial visit. Well, they shouldn't have, because he was still psychotic. And when he got home, he decided he wanted to murder my mother. And she, being the artful woman she was, talked him into making love instead. And that's where I came from. And an interesting beginning for a psychiatrist.
Exactly. And you, I love that you actually know that story. My God, my family has kept so many secrets. First of all, they totally disowned my dad, and my uncle could not mention Tony's name without a big old Italian curse words around it. And then you finally ask enough questions where somebody tells you the truth. Right. I mean, I didn't even know till Ancestry.com that on my mother's side, I could never understand the coloring of their eyes and their hair, right? Like my Aunt May had this dark hair with these blue eyes. And then these cockamamie stories of like where in Italy people. And finally I said to my uncle, listen to me. There's Ancestry.com that says Grandpa Balella was born in Brazil, like his birth certificate. What is wrong with you people? I mean, those are things that you just keep asking the questions, right?
Right.
Why do we keep secrets? I mean, there's a psychology to that. You know, by the way, I just want to tell you what I went on to study is my wound, and that is broken promises. I went on to study the consequences of broken promises for 8 years, 1,200 pages of notes. After I was done, my dissertation, my postdoctorate, all won awards. I was so depressed, doctor. I can't even tell you.
Depressed from?
Studying that thing and listening to stories
about broken promises.
Oh, my God. The betrayals around it. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was doing when I said yes to that. You know, my colleagues were studying positive psychology and happiness. I'm like, oh. How did
you go from, you know, that car accident you told me about to getting a PhD?
Oh, not easily. I mean, listen, my stepmom said to me, you either get yourself a job or you're going to end up in jail. I didn't get a job right away. I went the homeless route. But then I had a bunch of angels, and I had applied for a job in the phone company. And this woman, an angel, Doris Stoner, calls me in for an interview. She says, I don't know why I should hire you. You were out 41 days. We don't even know how you graduated high school, Pat. And she said that there's something about you, and I'm going to hire you. And I got a job in the mailroom at Bell Labs, the phone company, the old phone company. And I almost lost that job because I started to skip my mail routes because I was having too much fun with the PhDs. One day I turned to Linda, who I met in the phone company, and I said, I'm going to get a PhD. Now, I have to tell you, barely graduated high school. I couldn't put a sentence together. And Linda, this is a best friend, says to me, absolutely, you will. And I looked at her and I said, what exactly is a PhD? And she laughed. I never got an answer. But I wanted to study it because all these people I delivered mail to, Arno Penzias, the Big Bang guy, he gave me bagels. All of the mathematicians, the guys that were teaching me how to play ping pong. So I associated PhD with fun.
That's wonderful.
Somehow, some strange thing. I didn't go back to school. I worked my way up at Bell Labs because there's one thing about, I think, people like us that come from families like this. I think we've learned how to work hard. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
You think we've learned that?
And to enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it you know, to enjoy the creativity.
Yeah. And then I had a boss that said to me one day, you're not going to get ahead. You got to go back to school. I said, I can't go to school. Brian McGorry, I can't go to school at night. You people don't let us out because we're clerks. You don't let us out till after 5. And I said, by the time I would get to Fairleigh Dickinson, it would be too late. So you know what this guy did?
What?
Brian McGorry, right?
He said, the Globe?
Brian McGorry was my boss. Here's what he did. Bell Labs, the phone company. Unheard of for clerks to leave early. He said, I don't care. I'm authorizing you to leave, and I'm going to pay you.
Wow.
He ended up changing the entire policy in the phone company so that clerical people, large majority of them, could leave early to go back to school. He had
faith in you.
He did. And I'll tell you, it took me 13 years to get an undergraduate, but it wasn't until I lost my job at the company after 24 and a half years. I was the head of HR, and I couldn't implement a downsizing program. Why? Because my wound is broken promises. And they were going to fire all the older people. They wanted me to fire a woman with 29 years, 11 months. And I said, take my job, and off I went to school. I went back to school. I called Columbia, and I said, do you still have my application? My boss is firing me. You know, remember when they fire people now? You know this. I bet you see a lot of people that have lost their jobs, right?
Oh, yeah.
That is a problem. That is traumatic.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no humanity in the way we let people go. There just isn't. But
you know, just the increasing depersonalization of life, and that's why I stress connection so much. You know, when you feel connected, you're going to just naturally be kind. And,
is that why we're so attached to social media? because we are completely addicted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's not what the connection you're talking about.
No,
because
it's not.
It didn't help me.
No, it's not. The connection I'm talking about is much more warm and close and real and friendly, personal.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you this question. You and I are sitting here and we're sharing. I mean, I'm talking about stuff I've never talked about on air. And we're talking about these things and we're laughing and we're smiling.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people are wondering, why are these two laughing and smiling with these stories? And I don't really have a good answer to that. But somewhere along the way, there's something that from our upbringing, there's something that helped shaped us and molded us. What would you say it is for you?
Well, it's the natural tendency to be curious about other people and to want to connect with them. I mean, that's what I've been doing since I was 6 years old. You know, I mean, it's without doubt what got me through. You know, I want to know about people, and I'd ask about them. You know, so you know, find you. I want to know about you. You know?
Yeah.
I know you're interviewing me on a radio show, so I suppose I'm not supposed to want to know about you. But
oh no, I get it. But that's what you and I have in common. I mean, I didn't sit down and say I'm going to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars and buy airtime so that I can have great conversations with people like you. I just did it because it felt like breathing to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And you found your calling, and you found you found something that worked.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to just ask you this question about the future for people. And I know that we have a few minutes left. First of all, I want to encourage folks to get a copy of this book. This is the kind of book you read and you share with people that are close to you. It really is. And I do hope they do take this book and turn it into a mini series or something, do something with it. What's our message today? What do we want to say to folks that are depressed, that are lonely? Because there is, there could be a pot of gold at the other side of this. What do we want to say to them today?
It really is a matter of reaching out. It is, not to stay in hiding. And however you reach out, I mean, you're not going to feel like going to a party or something like that, but call someone up, go talk to the barista at Starbucks. It doesn't have to be a profound moment, just a little moment of connection. I mean it when I say get a dog. Dogs really are incredible connectors. They truly are. I'm not being funny. I really mean that, they're remarkable. So reach out however feels comfortable to you. It's one of my old teachers used to say, "Never worry alone." So don't let yourself remain in solitude. In silent suffering. That's when bad things happen.
Yeah, it really is. And I love the way you're talking about it. Clearly, every time I go back to New Jersey to visit Linda, she wants to keep me away from the deli counter because I just have a blast talking to people, right? Yes. And I get up at the register and I'm talking to the cashier. Now, if you're on the East Coast, it's a whole different pace than out here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
Yeah. You didn't.
What's the difference?
The difference is out here, like yesterday when I went to the grocery store up there at the Safeway, and I was talking to the young man who is really like a philosopher. We were talking about philosophy and about Thoreau. as he's bagging my stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
And so that takes a little extra time. Like he's stopping for a minute, and we're talking about the road. He gives me a quote like that, right?
That's
And he's doing
wonderful.
that to everybody. Do you know how long he would last in a grocery store in New Jersey, like out there, right? No, the pace is so fast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I will tell you this. For those of you that go to Hawaii, if you don't take the time to chat with people, look out.
You're in trouble.
You're in
So
trouble.
Hawaii, they make sure you slow down.
You can't help it.
Yeah.
You just, the minute you get off the plane and you feel that air,
Yeah.
it's just nothing like it. But in any event, no matter what your environment is, what you and I are talking about is universal.
Yeah.
And what we're sharing with people are things that are so critical for everyone to do right now to create a change in a pattern that is not really helping them on their pathway to happiness. And I think that's what your book is about as well.
Yeah, it is. It's about it is about the power of connection, and it is, that beating the odds, which I did, you did, and anybody can. It's all about hope, and that it's there for anybody.
Mm-hmm. There's a reason that one of the most popular words of our time right now, Dr. Hallowell, is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that this word has become the buzzword. There's also a reason why a majority of the population doesn't know what it means.
Yes.
Right?
Because it can be so hard to find.
It's so hard to find. And I think that what you're doing is you're really inviting all of us to step away from our shame, step away from our guilt, right?
I certainly am transparent in this book, that's for sure.
You are transparent in the book.
Yeah.
You are totally transparent. I got to say one thing, though. You know the picture that you have of you in the book in the back?
Yeah.
And you know the picture in the front?
Yeah.
Of you?
Yeah.
You look the same. How did you do that? How did you not age? You got that smile in the front, and now everybody, you guys got to look at the cover of the book. You got that smile in the front, that look in your eye, and I'm looking at the back, and you're still the same. Thank you so much for today. One last question. Please tell folks your website, how to get a copy of the book, and what's your personal message. What would you like to leave us with today? And thank you.
Well, go to Amazon.com and get Because I Come from a Crazy Family. And my message really is what we've been talking about. It's really about love and connection and hope. And the book is one person's account of how it actually works in the face of tremendous odds and adversity.
Yeah, I also want to mention, if I could, you're also the best-selling author of Driven to Distraction, which I love that.
Thank you.
I really do.
I
really do. Yeah. And maybe you'll come back and we'll talk about how that can get us to a level of creativity that, that's why Tom Cruise's movie right now is like popping it, the best movie he's ever done. Why?
Yeah.
Well, give him all the ADDs, dyslexic, and all of that.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. I'd love to take care.
Oh, my God. It's so great. I can't wait to have you back. The book, by the way, folks, it is fabulous. It's so well written. It puts you right smack in the middle of your own experiences. And on the other side of it, there really is a happy ending. All right, everyone. We'll see you in a little bit.
Lights go out and I can't be saved.
preceding audio was via a Skype call.